I'm Nadia Ely, and welcome to Grid Resiliency and Beyond. This series showcases our leaders and subject matter experts who highlight the strides and innovations Dominion Energy is making. Today's discussion covers the recent supply chain challenges met by Dominion Energy and how, through innovation, they were mitigated. Joining me to discuss this are Vice President of Shared Services Wendy Wellener and Ed Maitland, Manager of Supply Chain Services. Thanks so much for being with me. So, Wendy, while supply chain issues still exist with certain material types, can you share specifically how Dominion was able to overcome early supply chain challenges, how we're addressing current issues, and how these challenges have impacted operations and services thus far?
Absolutely. And thank you, Nadia, for having me here today. When COVID started, it was actually driven by COVID, but many geopolitical events as well. Weather events were kind of happening all about the same time. And it really gave the term supply chain resiliency new meaning to us, many of us in the supply chain world, but especially those of us working in supply chain at Dominion Energy. So we really had not only COVID happening and all of these other impacts, but we had unprecedented demand in some of our areas, most specifically for single-phase pads and pole-mounted transformers, where many utilities have grid hardening programs, strategic underground type programs, very similar to us. We had not really projected that demand to any of our manufacturers, so they weren't planning on that demand increasing. And so when we had COVID and the impacts coming out of that with material shortages, labor shortages, and things like that, it just exacerbated a problem that already existed that we really hadn't identified or expected. So at the same time, we took on several strategies. Like I said, the supply chain resiliency really drove us to pivot to how do we mitigate these impacts and ensure that we have what we need to keep our system running. So it was really driving on that part of our mission, which is reliability. We focused on that, and it included developing deeper relationships with our vendor partners by providing longer-term multi-year forecasts. In the past, we really didn't have to forecast as much because if we were running low, we could just order more, and in 6 to 8 weeks, it came. We really had to do a much better job working with our vendor partners, but also our business segment partners to ensure we knew what we needed and when. We looked internationally for different components specifically for transformers, and we were the first utility in the country to acquire single-phase pad transformers from a company called Fortune Electric in Taiwan for DEV. And at DESC, we were able to get pole-mounted transformers from a company called SGB located in South Africa to help offset a temporary shortfall that they were experiencing. Initially, we created many more meetings with the business segments to learn about what they were experiencing real time, and then tried to take that information and really strategize with both the segment team partners and our suppliers to get information quicker so that we could cut down on the time it actually took to resolve issues. It was quite the time for us, but we really had to, again, think about things differently and partner internally and externally differently to ensure that we could focus on reliability of our grid.
Thank you, Wendy. And quick follow-up, would you say that we're still not completely out of the woods yet when it comes to our supply chain being back to robust as we saw pre-pandemic?
I think we are seeing the market settle back a little bit in a lot of areas. Lead times are decreasing in some areas, but in others like electric transmission, we're seeing demand and growth continue to expand, and there your lead times are longer and probably will continue to be so because there's such a demand for that type of equipment throughout the industry.
Ed, what have been some of the key factors contributing to the supply chain issues, and how did your team specifically identify and address these bottlenecks?
Great question, Nadia. Early on, there were really two key factors, and they dealt with employee retention and lack of transportation. And this hit us all up and down the entire supply chain. You know, if you think about it, if you can't get raw materials, you can't make component parts. If you don't have component parts, you can't make finished goods. And this hit us for a lot of different materials. We addressed the bottlenecks by working with our partners in the business segment and we identified, a key list of materials that we identified as must-haves, and we took those materials and then we plotted out, what are the vendors and where are we getting this material from? And when we were looking at it, a lot of times we had one, maybe two suppliers for this list of key materials. And if you look at that list today, it's going to look so much different. For most of these materials, we have two, three, even four different vendors. And what this has done is that by increasing the number of sources for materials that we've had, it's allowed us to strengthen our continuity supply and have materials available so that jobs can be energized on time.
Thank you, Ed. Wendy, coming back to you, and you touched on this a little bit in your previous question. What innovative strategies or technologies were and are being implemented to lessen the lingering impact of these supply chain challenges?
One of the things we identified fairly early on was that there was a lack of transparency for the business segment to really see where materials were in our procurement process. And overall, we didn't have a whole lot of transparency in our procurement data and process data to really allow data-driven decision making in a lot of ways. So our supply chain team worked together with our Center of Excellence team that we have within our shared services umbrella to create Power BI reporting using Power BI and Power Apps tools that allow the business segments to quickly and easily determine where materials were in the procurement process by showing them what materials were on order, when they were coming in, when they were being delivered, and in what quantity. So it really helped not only the forecasting process, but also planning jobs and where things needed to be delivered and prioritized. So this data, utilizing these scorecards, is available 24/7 via the Power BI and Power Apps tools, and allows for quicker and more accurate decision making when it comes time to allocate materials so jobs can be energized on time. And it also cuts down significantly on multiple one-off reports and serves as a single source of truth. So we have multiple dashboards that we've now created with regard to who we're spending money with, O&M versus capital spend, lots of great information and insights that before we would have a lot of time wrapped up into running reports. We have greater visibility into our data. As Ed mentioned, we worked closely with the business segments to identify new suppliers who we might not have considered in the past. So we tend to have relationships, as we do sometimes personally. You have certain stores you like, certain places you like to shop. Well, we had strong relationships with some key suppliers who've been fantastic resources for us in the past and have always been able to come through for us. But when the supply chain constraints started to become more of a reality, we knew we needed to think differently and open our aperture to consider others, because we just weren't going to be able to get what we needed from that one trusted and respected supplier. We needed to really engage with others. So the segments really came together to approve new suppliers and new materials, which also helped tremendously.
Thanks, Wendy. Ed, how do these innovative solutions enhance the efficiency, reliability, and sustainability of your supply chain processes? And what were the measurable outcomes?
Ultimately, it was the combined efforts of, everything we've discussed so far. This kind of helped us get out of this jam a little bit. This year for Strategic Underground, we're going to install 5,000, over 5,300 single-phase pad transformers, which is just an incredible number. And we also have over 5,000 single-phase pad transformers available for the new connects and the transformer inspection program. So if you add those two together, it's over 10,300 single-phase pad transformers, which is a record for the company. Our company's previous record for installs in any one given year was 6,500 transformers. That's almost 4,000 more this year than we've ever done. I couldn't be more prouder of the supply chain team that we've had, because it's not only the transformers, it's all the other materials that go into, energizing jobs on time. And, we couldn't have done any of this without our, vendor partners. We collectively rolled up our sleeves, and it was a one Dominion effort to get us to where we are today.
Thank you, Ed. Wendy, back to you. Can you share some ways in which Dominion collaborates with these suppliers, partners, and stakeholders to streamline the supply chain when scarcity does become an issue?
We quickly recognized early on during the supply chain crisis that we had an opportunity to expand both the quality and the cadence of our communications with our suppliers and our business segments. On the supplier side, we increased executive level interaction both on the supply chain team and the business segment leaders. We also expanded the number of categories where we held quarterly business reviews. These business reviews are really just opportunities where we can meet with some of our key vendors and share longer term company goals and metrics so that we can track performance and hold each other accountable. Going back to my earlier comments on the transformers, we as an industry, in my view, we just weren't proactive enough at informing our transformer manufacturers that we were going to need more transformers over time and that that demand would continue on into the future. And so it's really up to us to ensure that we are explaining to our supplier partners, not what's happening today and what's important to us today, but what's important to us going into the future. We know that our expected load growth here in DOM zone is about 5.5% load growth year over year. And that's a record for us. That is in the industry well above anything else that our peers are expecting. So that is going to drive our utilization of materials and services up. That will continue to grow. And so we need to be continuing to talk to our suppliers about that and potential in the future, what we need so that they can continue to be reliable partners for us. We also really held more detailed meetings and opened up dialogue at the operational level where we learned about each other's kind of internal workings and processes. So what supply chain needed and what we needed to ensure that we were able to manage our processes on our side, and what the business segment needed and had what their desires were and what their needs were. And it really just that mutual sharing of information allowed for a more in-depth understanding of really just how to get the job done. By doing this, it really allowed us to create more value-added tasks while eliminating the things that really were no longer needed or had become obsolete. So it's been kind of an effort along our new mission of getting back to basics as well, eliminating some things that we didn't need to do anymore to create more time for those really value-added activities that are so critical for us.
Great lessons learned there, Wendy. Thank you. This last question is for both of you. Looking ahead, how do you plan to further enhance supply chain resilience and adaptability in the face of an evolving energy landscape and future potential disruptions? Ed, I'll start with you. And Wendy, I welcome your thoughts as well.
Great question. One of the things that we're trying to do is continuously develop deeper partnership with our key suppliers. Wendy talked about longer term forecast, and that's definitely something that we've seen that has provided, not an instant relief for us, but we see the fruits of that, 6, 10, 12 months afterwards. But what that longer forecast does is that allows our vendor partners to be able to plan the materials that they're going to buy and also plan their manufacturing allocation slots. So that in turn has helped us get into a better position than we are today. We continue to track key commodities. Wendy talked about the Center of Excellence. That group, what they do is they track a key set of commodities, and that allows us to make more proactive decisions instead of reactive decisions when we see something happening. And therefore, we can get out in front of any other supply or get out in front of any potential supply disruptions.
We will definitely continue to leverage spend from both DEV and DESC to help drive value for the company, but we'll also continue to embrace change by using new technologies. AI continues to be a big topic for the company, but could possibly help our supply chain teams become more efficient and effective, which will help enable better business outcomes as well.
I'd like to thank Wendy Wellener and Ed Maitland for their expertise and participation. Thanks for listening, and be on the lookout for future episodes. I'm Nadia Ely.